I think, we're just going to do a brief little video. Um, Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're safe. I hope all is well. Um, I want to be brief. I think I want to talk about, let's see, how do we set the mood? How do we set the mood? Samuel and God and the Israelites. Let's set it there. Let's set it there, and then we're gonna mosey down into some other things. So, keeping it brief, keeping it short, Samuel was a leader over the Israelites for a moment in time. He was never their king, he was a leader. And so there came a time where the Israelites, they wanted to be like the other people, and so they wanted a king, yada yada yada. Samuel went to God and inquired of the Lord, and God tried to get insight, common sense, prudence, understanding, wisdom, knowledge concerning the situation. And then God answered and was like, well, basically, if they want a king, let them know of these things that will happen and what comes with that, what all covers the territory of being under a king. And so Samuel submitted to it, and he did it. He didn't try to manipulate their understanding. He didn't try to sway them into, well, my understanding, he didn't try to sway them into not wanting a king. He did what God recommended be done and said be done. And, at that point, he did what God told him to do, and they still wanted a king. And there it was. I mean, there was nothing else to be said. That was considered a sin. It was considered a act against God. But yet God allowed it because they wanted it. And so and so I say all of that because we are in a time where, and I don't understand some things, and it's not for me to understand everything. I'm not God. I'm only a human being who's like a blade of grass and who's like vapors, here today, gone tomorrow. And yet there's so much purpose in all of us, but we're still like this big in the scheme of things. But we are not here to control any individual or make people believe in God, make people choose God. They have to choose that for themselves. Samuel began to talk to God about it, and basically was like, is it something that I did, yada yada yada. He was pleading to the people, trying to figure out where if I went wrong that made y'all want this. And God at some point was like, don't think that it is about you, because they have always done this to me. They have always abandoned me. And so, we have to really realize that sometimes, and people are going to hate to hear this, God allows things because people have to choose. Faith is a choice. The lack of faith is a choice. Every action we take as human beings requires a decision. And so, me wanting to believe in God does not affect anyone else. I'll never, I don't mind sharing my faith. I don't mind talking to people about Jesus. But I try to be as wise as a dove and as gentle as as wise as a serpent and as gentle as a dove in regards to that. Because there is a right time for everything. In every encounter, God sets the stage, and I believe that. But I want to really tie that into the Samuel situation, to, I guess, where my heart is at and where it's been for a very long time. We're already 4 minutes in, but a while ago, I shared this dream before, but a while ago I had a dream, and I was standing on the top of a church, and this white letter fell out of the sky, and as I was kind of like translated or teleported from the top of the church to the ground, I picked it up, and it turned into a milk carton, and it said "Rule of Law," and it was like giving me the feeling like a missing child kind of a situation. And so, that was before a lot of, well, it wasn't before the political debates and stuff like that, but it was happening before voting and all of this other stuff. And so I I'll be honest, I did not want the one that we got, which is fine. I mean, at the end of the day, I think God began to prepare me for it because I only prayed one time. about that situation. And sometimes you just know when to let it go, and there's just a peace about it. I prayed one time about the dream and I let it go. And then I think a few months later, God began to like put, I felt, well, I'm not going to say God put it, but I felt in my spirit, like in my being, I just wanted to ask people, like, how would they feel if this person won? And I mean, I wanted to ask Christians and non Christians alike. And it was kind of like the response was the same, I guess, kind of, even though Christians, more, well, my fellow brothers and sisters were like, well, we're just still going to believe God regardless, which is the response it should be. But, I don't know. It just kind of like you just knew that he was going to win, which is okay, which is okay because in the end, God is going to be God, right? But I think people don't understand, and I'm gonna cut a little bit short, that God always wanted to be our king. And regardless what people say or not, I know there are people that say Trump is not God, and he's not. He's not. But you have to look at this moment with discernment. Discernment doesn't require a lot of spiritual insight, I don't think. If you have eyes, if someone tells you, let's use this analogy, right? If your money is missing and you had a bag with money in it and you laid it beside this person and they're the only person nearby and you know you had money in that bag and that money is missing, discernment should easily say they took the money and nobody walked by. Like that's literally how discernment works, and it's common sense, right? And so to me, this is where I'll start throwing in. God has really kind of led me to read a lot of Proverbs and stuff, and I'm glad I did because there's so much wisdom in it, and Ecclesiastes and all the Psalms. But there's a proverb that no, it's in Ecclesiastes 7 and 10, and it talks about not saying, "Oh, how we wish that the times were like they were." And that began to make me think about, making America great again because it reflects on a time that was, and whether that time was good or bad, because it's going to be bad for some and it's going to be good for others. But at the end of the day, the Bible tells us it's foolish to look in the past and want things to be like they were. That's foolish. It's not wise. It's not of God to do that. It doesn't say it's not of God, but if it's foolish, then it can't be of God. It's not wise to do such a thing, right? But then we also have Proverbs that tell us that the wicked hate the poor. And we have so many other, I mean, I can go down the list of everything that literally, along with what I learned from my personal life, stuff that just kind of stood out as the moment that we're coming into. And it's just kind of like, well, I mean, God, what do we do? Because there are people who they don't care. They believe that this man was the best choice. They don't believe that they chose Saul. Because, and I'm not saying, see, I don't know, I'm not in heaven. I'm not with God. I'm another human being. I'm another person experiencing this life with the rest of us. But I do think we get a choice in these decisions, you know. Rahab made a choice. I mean, so many people in the Bible made a choice. Sarah made a choice to tell Abraham to sleep with Hagar. We all make choices. We all make choices that, I mean, just kind of like impede the will of God. But the only person that we saw decided not to do that was Jesus. He said, "Not my will, but your will be done." But we tend to think that, oh, if I do something and God allows it, then it's his will. That's it is he allowed it. So it's his permissive will, but was it his perfect will? That's another whole topic. But my thing is, we look at a man, and granted, we had two things as believers, and I'm speaking to believers. We had two things on the table, right? We had abortion or racism, inequality, depriving the poor, the needy, the widow, the orphan, the elders. We had Now, one was on one hand, the other was on the other. These that I'm listing now are on the other hand. We had rejecting the foreigner, neglecting them. I mean, I can go down the list of everything that just kind of opposes God, right? And now, if I paint this portrait, and I hope that you get the picture, on the hand of abortion, people get to make that choice, right? Going back to Samuel, people get to make that choice. Though yet us as believers, we don't want them to make that choice. They get to make that choice, right? Now, if we side with a man who we know or anyone we know is going to kick people out, is going to make it where some people may not be able to get jobs. That's their livelihood. That's the way they eat. That's the way they experience gladness and joy in the land of the living, which is a gift from God, as is mentioned in Ecclesiastes. The fact of being able to eat, drink, and enjoy your labor is a gift from God. So when you deprive any man from that, you're depriving them a gift from God. And we had, it was hard on both ends, but one aspect that is super important, people have to choose to love God. People have to choose to serve God. Because if it's in their heart, they've already committed the sin. They've already done it, right? If they reject that baby, neglect that baby, hate that baby, they've already killed the baby. And so it doesn't necessarily matter if they go through with it or not, because it transpired in their heart. The same way, if we go and look at David when he slept with Bathsheba and he compounded the sins, right? It started in his heart. And so we have to understand, you cannot that goes a little into a whole nother thing. But this is not good. It's never been good. And I don't see how we are okay with any of this. And I don't see how we're kind of blinded by it, because Jesus is Lord. That's not changing. Um, he's coming back, I believe. To me, that's not changing. But there, oh man, I mean, my heart, it's like, I what do I advocate for? I advocate for people being able to get the chance to see Jesus Christ, not be forced to see him, but to see him, to experience him through the salt and the light in which we are supposed to be. That's what I stand for. That's the only thing I stand for. If people benefit from that, that's good, but that is the only thing I stand for. I stand for that. I stand for people being able to make their choices, their free will, their decisions, because Jesus came that we might have life and life more abundantly, right? I'll use this one, and this might be the last thing I talk about. But there was a man that Jesus was talking to, and he said, your punishment will be worse than that of Tyre, Sodom and Gomorrah, and so many of these other places. And why? This was at around the time people began to want blessings from Jesus rather than to actually change their life. And so they didn't want him. They didn't want him. They wanted the things that he had. And that was more despicable than people who didn't know of God. And some people may disagree. It is what it is. But I don't know. I mean, they don't know. Some of them do. I'm not gonna say some of them do. Some of them don't. I don't know. I don't know who does and who don't. I don't know any man's heart. I'm not God. I'm not God. I can't sit here and make that verdict or that judgment. But I'm sitting here kind of aggravated and super. I was aggravated the day of, and as life and time moved on, I progressed because life goes on and I got things to do. Like when God exiled the children of Israel into Babylon, he told them to plant gardens, get married, have children, and pray for the welfare of the nation in which you have exiled, because their welfare will be your own. He gave them these things to do because they were going to be there for a little while, but he had plans to prosper them and not to harm them. He was chastising and correcting them in that moment as well. And so life goes on. Life goes on even when things start happening. But I don't see any of this working out in the favor of, now hear me when I say this, believers. And we think, and there are some people who are talking about, oh, this is our time to shine, the church's time to shine. I don't think so, because it judgment starts, or the cleansing starts in the house of God first. And so I don't know. I mean, I do think that we elected, as because the outside, they're not Israel. We are right. And so we chose Saul. The believers chose who they thought looked the best, had the stature, had the accolades, had the representation, stood for what God wanted. And I mean, did we ever just ponder that maybe we picked Saul when God wanted to be king? And we picked forcing people to do what we wanted them to do rather than giving them the free will and liberty to see. And let's say this, right? There's another proverb that talks about giving money to the rich is foolish and it leads to poverty. Also, it talks about denying the poor and rejecting the poor leads to poverty. So there's a whole lot of things. Yes, if Kamala was going to allow people to commit murder to their children, that's sad. That's sad. It sucks. I mean, I don't want that. I don't like that. But at the end of the day, those people have to choose that. If people cannot choose if they're mistreated because of the color of their skin, if they made a decision and now whatever, because of that decision, they can't get medicine, they can't, I mean, whatever. Um I don't know. One people had to make a choice. That's the one hand. The other hand, you're messing with liberties and you're messing with justice. You know, the fact of the matter that if people can't get jobs, then like let's mention Agur's prayer. And I know I'm going on a while here, but let's mention Agur's prayer. And he said, I think it's in Proverbs, but he was like, God, don't give me too much that I forget about you, and don't give me too much that I sin against you and disgrace your name. No, don't give me too little. Don't give me too little that I sin against you and disgrace your name. So he wanted just enough to be able to acknowledge God daily for his daily bread. And so if we start to deprive people of that, Agur was smart enough to realize too much can open a door to wickedness, and too little can open a door to wickedness. So you're bringing even more people to a position where they have to sin against God. And as we saw, mentioning David again with Bathsheba, God said to David, if only I would have knew, I would have given you more. So how will these people know? I mean, one thing about it, when you're forcing something down somebody's throat, they're definitely not going to want it. They're definitely not going to know they need it, because there was never the heart wasn't pliable enough. You didn't work. You didn't work to earn their trust nor their favor. So where do we have the right to be able to talk to them about Jesus or anything like that? There was no wisdom. There was no gentleness. There was no prudence. There was no discretion. I mean, it's just where do we go from here? I mean, besides living life per usual. But I'm just kind of disgruntled at it's not every believer. It's not, and this is one thing I've learned growing up. You can't blame one person, or you can't blame a group of people for what one person did or what a few people are doing. But it's just kind of disheartening because voting for Kamala would not have been you standing for the Antichrist or you standing for abortion. But because if that's the case, if that's the case, and yeah, I don't think it is, the shoe has to be on the other foot, because voting for Trump meant that you stood for oppressing the poor. You stood for giving more money to the rich, which leads to poverty. That means you stood for rape. You stood for, what was it? What was it? Whatever. You stood for all of these things that the wicked do: deceiving, deception, impure motives. Like, you stand for it. You stand for it. But that's what that means, right? That, I mean, because there is no if, ands, or buts about it. If that's what it meant to stand for her, then that's what it means to stand for him. And the measure in which you judge, you will be judged. So judging people who voted for her and saying y'all stood for abortion, that means you not only stood for one thing, but you stood for the multiple things that that man has and will do. You understand? And so we all know the story of Saul. Saul, he failed. He made his many mistakes, and we're human. We're gonna make mistakes. But my prayer, I've prayed that but regardless of my perception and my desires, that the glory of God transpire and that Trump do exceedingly far greater than what is projected to happen. Um I don't know. I just think I really wanted to express, and I hope I did. I don't know. I'm whatever. But we have to understand as believers that people got to choose God. We cannot force them to. They have to make the decision to want God. And yes, I am likening because them wanting a king was just as sinful as people wanting to kill their babies. It's the same, that like there is no weight to God. It's all the same. It's all the same. You rejected God and you're rejecting God on both sides of the coin. It's rejection of God. But people got to make their own decisions, and that's where God stood. People got to make their own decisions. Let them know of the negatives and what the decisions that they want to make. Let them know. But we didn't have nobody to let us know, because we have people who want to dictate. We have people who want to be God. We have people who want to contort and force their hand upon other people because they don't really know Christ. Um, Christ, and I say this like Paul, well, not like Paul, but Paul, he became like them. He did not sin with them. He did not adopt their defiling behaviors, but he became like them so that he may win some of them. So that he may win some of them. We'll never be as potent and as powerful as the people that we read about, the men of old, because we won't do what they did. We won't humble ourselves in a lot of aspects of our lives. We'll never have a true. I do believe we have many prophets. We have prophets in the land of the living, I believe, but we'll never have someone like John the Baptist, even though the word talks about that. But John the Baptist was not scared to confront people. And I'm not talking about behind computer screens or behind cell phones or behind any digital device. He went to their face. We don't have anybody like that. We don't have anybody like Elijah. We don't have anybody like Jeremiah. We don't have anybody. All of them almost kind of sort of share the same trait. They were bold and they were actually for God. But today we have people who are more worried about their money, their livelihood, their accounts being shut down. They won't say certain words. They won't say LGBTQ. They won't say rape. They won't say murder. They won't say, I don't care. I mean, you whatever. We just don't have it. We don't have it. We have a lot of minor prophets, and I say that as a slur. We have minor prophets, but we don't have a prophet. We don't, and Jesus is really the last prophet, but there has to be someone willing and able. I'm annoyed. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't know. I mean, we will see as the days unfold, but I do believe that rule of law is gonna go missing in the land of the living. But I mean, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, that's fine. I'll never sit here and say I'm a prophet. I'll never sit here and say I'm speaking for God. I don't know. I'm human. I'm human, you know. But I'm out. Y'all be blessed. Love yourselves and love others. Remember to stay positive. Take what I say with a grain of salt. Talk to God about everything. Pray about everything because we are human. We are human. We're supposed to love each other, protect each other, make sure each individual gets to see the light of God, the light of Christ in the land of the living. That's our job. But I mean, everybody's not going to do that. We can't force it on people. We have to let people choose it. We have to let people choose it. So I'm out. Later.